We've seen what's possible with agents and tooling. It's time now to zoom out. We're going to talk about what keeps it all running reliably in production, which is observability. As more teams move from prototypes to real workloads, understanding how models behave and misbehave becomes mission critical. To help us unpack the future of LLM observability, we're going to be welcoming Sam Bhagwat, our CEO, or rather, Mastra CEO, not my CEO. And two panelists, Marc Klingen, the co-founder and CEO of Langfuse, an open source LLM engineering platform, and Jason Lopatecki, the founder and CEO of Arize, and my boss as of 7 days ago. Also an AI and ML observability platform. Please let's give a warm welcome to our panelists.
So the topic today is the future of observability, and we have two sort of founder CEOs of two of the major observability platforms here, Arize and Langfuse. So I'm excited to have this conversation. I think observability is an interesting topic. Maybe a good place to start off is sort of, we talk about observability as sort of evals and traces, but I'd love to your take, if you're just getting started, is it evals, is it traces? Where should folks start?
For me, it's kind of we just landed on traces initially because we wanted something like ML Flow, but for our AI apps that we built as founders 2 years ago. And we just wanted traces to see what's happening step by step within the application. It seems to be the most upstream thing to solve for. There's really that you can just use and then build evals and more monitoring downstream from this and metrics. So yeah, we just use traces I think traces is the fundamental thing that you need first.
And I swear we're not biased as observability companies, but I do think evals, my view is, I don't know how many people heard the Swix comment a couple weeks ago of no one's using evals or evals aren't very, yeah, I see a lot of heads shaking. I think it's extreme. We have a lot of customers. I have customers spending to OpenAI, not to us, but $1 million a month on evals. So and they're generating a lot of revenue. So evals are real. They're real. But I do think, and I think you can't build. My view is very skeptical in that I don't think you can build a really high quality agent without doing evals both offline and online in some real fashion. But if you're starting with, most of you are, and just starting to build, it is traces that you start with. It is, you're using a framework and there's 100 distributed system calls underneath this one line of code and you don't know what's going on or you need to edit a prompt somewhere. It is the magic of being able to replay that, edit some instructions in a prompt and then ship that kind of gets you started. So I'm kind of, traces and observability is the start I think of all of you should do, but then evals if you wanted to deliver something of real quality in the end.
Yeah, and that's actually probably a good place to sort of jump on to the next question. How do you see people using online versus offline evals? And maybe the first person to answer can just explain a little bit of the difference between those two to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, offline, I view offline as kind of like unit tests, and you can build them in a couple ways. I feel like the first evals and the vendors in the market were kind of pitching you, build your tests first and then build your app, and so when you ship it's great. And I don't think any one of us really do that. We kind of build something, we vibe test it, we ship it, then we build some evals after. And I think the challenge though is if you want to make a prompt change, you can break 15 things. It's so easy to add some instructions or break 15 things. And so you really want a set of tests, you make a change and you run those and you kind of know you didn't break anything. And so that's kind of the offline case. It runs typically in code, you push the results into our experiments in one of our platforms. And then online tends to be things running and I'm dropping insights that are is the question answered correctly? Is the person frustrated? Is the tool call, am I, tool call is correct here? And then online, I mean, we used it for more interesting things. We have planning in some agents and understanding if the flow is correct. So you can kind of, is it taking a step? And you kind of have these bugs that come up and maybe you want to catch them. So you can do really deep technical stuff and you can do high level product stuff is someone frustrated with online. So those are kind of the two I see.
Yeah, I think for us, we see along big loop between the two, because usually you do like offline testing, but you don't even know what you're testing for when you're launching, especially when you are like following the kind of, oh, we need evals before we even launch. You don't even know what users will be doing with the application. Like the distribution can be so broad. You test for something, and then people do something else, and you don't notice. It's like a continuous, like using like online eval. I think it's more like monitoring of like how to detect whether something works in prod, and then off of this you find like interesting new cases to add to offline evals to hopefully at some point be like, oh, if I make a change, then evals go up, then actually the user experience goes up. But in the beginning, this is not the case. It's just like your evals look good, but the users still have a bad time. So yeah, that's kind of like this loop between the two. I think we see most like B2C applications just launch to prod because you don't really care that much about the experience of a single user, and then use online monitoring more, and more like B2B apps, like I don't know, if you build AI for lawyers, then you have like some idea of, oh, we need like 1,000 test cases first, need to get lawyers on the team to label data. Like it's a bit like what kind of application you build where you focus first. But usually it's like, if you can, just go to production and see what users do with it, and then start with online evals because it's much faster, like time to value.
I agree. Question for, how many people have wrote an eval here?
Just maybe raise their hands.
All right.
Okay. And then maybe another question, like how many people have sort of like evals that are running like regularly in a cron job or CI or something?
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Okay, yeah, so a decent amount of hands go up the first time, fewer hands up the second time, which is an interesting data point, I think, just of the composition and some of the challenges of kind of bringing evals into, and maybe even just like launching into production in general. So I think like one kind of like interesting thing that's, you know, kind of floating around the space is the OTEL standard. So OpenTelemetry, for those who aren't familiar, it's a standard for traces. And I'd love to hear like both of your takes on kind of pro cons of OTEL for instrumentation and instrumentation and exports of tracing.
We were comparatively, I'd say, late to OpenTelemetry because we cared a lot about like how the user experience is, especially in TypeScript, and we felt like OpenTelemetry is a bit bloated and we needed a lot of engineering effort to make it nice. So initially we started by just forking the Mixpanel SDKs and Postgres SDKs to build something ourselves, but then more and more realized actually you want distributed tracing like with A2A, or you want like auto instrumentation of Prisma or Drizzle or something if you do like database queries. And now we could instrument all of this, but this makes no sense. Like there's like community instrumentation libraries and we should just collaborate on this. So then went the full OpenTelemetry route this year, re-architected all of the SDKs for it, and now, I mean, it's a lot of like, how do you make it nice, because you don't want all of these infrastructure spans to just show up because they're kind of like meaningless to you. You want to filter them out. So I think there's like a big, like for me, it's like everything will tend towards OpenTelemetry, even though the semantic conventions, which is basically like the schema that you expect in span attributes, like it's very, like it's developing. It's like the least common denominator, like the smallest one. So a lot of like vendor specific code in it. But yeah, it's still better than everyone inventing new stuff on the transport as well. So I'm very much pro OpenTelemetry, but it's not like vendor agnostic just because it's OpenTelemetry. It's still like a lot of monkey patching, but at least the distributed tracing works and the auto-administration works. So yeah, it's like our stance.
Yeah, totally. And how many of you, I guess another question, how many of you even know what OTEL is? Okay. It's a good crowd. Wow. Awesome. Yeah, all right.
That's great.
Yeah. So I think a lot of us have jumped on OTEL. I mean, I feel like some of our competitors maybe are a little still proprietary, but in the end, it's so you instrument once and you can switch between us if you want to switch to the competitor or different vendor. Yeah, we're early to it. It's still somewhat of a mess on the attribute side. I feel like there, you can be OTEL, but you need to all agree on like this means this and this means that from an attribute perspective. And we're still working. It's just slow, and this space is so fast. So we're where the space is still a bit ahead of like that standardization piece.
Yeah. Yeah. So one question would be like, there's kind of, pre-AI observability tools. And how, like, obviously both of you are running companies that are like AI native observability tools. How do you think about like whether someone building an agent should be using one of those vendors versus like a newer vendor? Like what's the differentiation that you're offering?
Interesting. I don't identify as running an observability company, I think, because yes, there are like ops teams that need like observability tooling, and we ourselves use Datadog, and it's totally fine, but it's a completely different use case. Like we build tooling for teams that want to build useful agents or applications, and it's kind of like not just the ops guy, but it's kind of the whole application team, the PM, the data labeling person, the exec that wants to see metrics, and it's just like observability is like the data in stream, but then everything beyond is more like a workflow. And I think it's just like it's a completely different category from my perspective.
I see the same. I mean, we originally, we started the company, I'm like, I want to be the Datadog for AI, which really, honestly, was the seed pitch. Now Datadog's an investor. But I don't think, and I was worried about those vendors early on, but like, I think he's right. Like these products are just different. Like Datadog isn't used in development. Our stuff is used every day in development, and in development, it means like you're iterating. You need a software that just feels fast. You need you have workflows that are heavy, like uploading of data and data sets and downloading of data sets. You have data that needs to be accessed outside of that system. Where Datadog, you just pour the data in, and it's kind of ephemeral. Who cares if it disappears in 10 days? And then the workflows are really about like iterating and changing prompts and saving prompts and debugging and troubleshooting that instance. And I think a lot of these, I think that key with development, I think the key with like, it really is like that, you had an LLM engineering platform, I think first on your site. And I really think that's what it is. We're building like agent engineering platforms right now that help you work with the frameworks that you're building and just help you make these agents that aren't working actually useful, take you from POC to something you're proud of. That's amazing. So I think it's just very different as a product. That's not, Datadog's like a production transom that you throw your stuff into and helps you troubleshoot your timing.
Yeah. And maybe that's actually a good lead into another question, which is, let's talk a little bit about sort of the difference between what you use observability, what you need observability for in development versus what you need observability for in production. And like, can you maybe just talk a little bit about like the different use cases there?
Yeah, I think the P0 workflow I see all the time is like, this doesn't, maybe I'm vibe testing or maybe I'm running in my test, and this thing doesn't do what I want it to do. And so I go to my trace that has the prompt, I pull that into the playground with all the data that it was running off of, with the tools associated with it, I replay it. Why did it call that tool? Maybe I edit and put an instruction in. Like that flow is like every day for every team. And you just can't improve your stuff if you're just like touching your prompt, but like not running it with the data, just acted on. You can't fix these systems. So I think in development that's an iterative flow. Can it be AI assisted? Do you have other things that make these flows better? I think there's a lot around that. I think there's yeah, it's just these iterative flows where prompts are the center of it. That I think is what these platforms kind of empower.
Yeah, that's like the offline piece. I think for the online, it's more like I don't know. Usually these apps are never great. They are always at like, I don't know, hopefully like a 99 whatever % of greatness. And then the question is what is like the lead, like what's not great? And you want to kind of see it, and you want to see how big it is, like the non-greatness. So it's more like online monitoring, what kind of metrics can you track on dashboards or via alerts? And then I want to look at interesting data every week to learn, I don't know, to reason about how the system works. So then it's kind of like how do I either like in the beginning just randomly sample, and at some point I like user complaints and look at the single trace, or I just have like online evals to sample in an interesting way, like the 10, 100 cases that I should be looking at every week. So that's more like the online monitoring. And I think over time, it's more and more like, how do we as platforms be like more predictive of, you should be changing this and that, or we made this change, back tested. Like somewhat getting into this direction is, I think, interesting over the next year. But right now, it's more like, how do we present interesting data to users so they can act on it and improve their applications? Yeah. Because you can be working on so many things. Like you have so many hypotheses all day, but you should be working on like the one thing that drives like most benefits.
Yeah, I think also I hear a lot of teams where someone's like, I'll do, I'll instrument you in a little bit when I'm further along and it's working, and I'm like, I'm not sure you're going to get it working. Like it's almost you really have to go just instrument and just do that one little flow we were talking about there.
Takes like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I know, and I'm just not sure you're going to get there without it. It's like it's almost the Datadog, like it's a software mindset. I'll instrument in production and you actually really need this stuff earlier in cycle.
Like setting up Datadog is pretty hard.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. That's an interesting point as well. Like just kind of like there's a slightly different software is more deterministic than most software is more deterministic than AI engineering in general, right? And I think as a field, we're learning to kind of switch our focus a little bit and change how we're thinking about building. Let's talk about like what's changing in the field a little bit. So one thing, there's increasingly a move to sort of longer running agents. I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on how that affects kind of observability tooling.
I don't see a big effect on tooling, because in the end it's just like then longer spans. Where I see like a lot of effect is more like if we would see more real-time APIs like WebRTC, this would change a lot, because you kind of then want to see like what happened within the stream at what timestamp. Like for more like audio applications, I think there are no like existing observability patterns for this, or not like big ones. I think for the longer running background agents, in the end it's just like you move away from traces or runs as they were in the beginning of these platforms, and you're more like, oh, you just have nested spans, and you just have like an intelligent way of filtering nested spans to basically, I don't know, target single agents or target the workflow. But in the end, it's just like nesting levels. So I don't see a big change. Like we are adapting to this right now, but like I'm quite optimistic.
I think my rough take is like, I just think it begets like anytime. We had like the first generation of stuff like last year, which was like a prompt and a response. And now what you have is much more complex systems where you have like, the simplest form is like a, iterative loop with tools, more complex thing with planning now, planning tools. And I just think a long running agent just means more complication. And I've watched and literally debugged myself some really complex stuff, both with customers, both internal, and like, I just think the more complex this stuff gets, the more you just can't do it without like try to debug an agent with planning without like our tools. You cannot. So I think it's really hard, and I've done it. So like I think these long running things just mean more complexity, and more complexity means like you probably need more tooling to help. That's my rough take.
I think what's interesting is if we have like more planning or more context, you want more and more like tooling to point to, this is the interesting bit to check out. Because initially, I don't know, the hello world was like, what's the, I don't know, write a poem or something, and you can just fit everything into like your visual context. Once it's like, I don't know, 100 pages of stuff you could basically need to read to understand what's going on. Like it's more and more like, you want like pinpointing to like, oh, read these 3 segments. These are actually interesting here to get to the problem faster. Very similar to like what, for example, like observability players are doing with regards to, I don't know, in Sentry, this happened. Okay, you should be looking at these log lines. I think it's very similar in this space where it's like, okay, the agent didn't work here. The quality wasn't good. Okay, it's probably this one tool call that is the problem. Like it shouldn't have happened, or the response wasn't good. Yep. I think it's trending to this direction.
Totally.
Yeah. So I think we call this panel the future of observability panel. So like, let's really kind of like project out into the future. I mean, like it's really, we'll say 1 or 2 years, which is really a long time. And as we all know, in AI world, like what are some sort of like crazy things or like just things that maybe people aren't anticipating right now that you think are going to be increasingly common in observability over the next year or 2?
I'd say everything that currently humans do with tooling in the space, just like the tooling or AI does by itself. So it's more like, how do you learn from production to then make development testing better, and then craft new experiments to run on development data sets, and then launch them to production as experiments A/B tested to then arrive at the conclusion of, oh, this is actually better. So I think you can do the full workflow of monitoring and prod, deriving hypotheses, like amending data sets, testing on them, and launching back to prod. You should be able to close all of this rapidly, like full auto kind of. I think this is where it's going for some applications that have like more throughput.
Okay.
Yeah, I think observability could, like even the Datadog side could look very different in a year or 2. And I think it's probably true. I mean, I think it's probably true of a lot of SaaS applications where we're all used to clicking on windows and graphical things, and and we're all in the room here building agents, hopefully. And just if we do it right, I just think there's a lot of workflow automation that comes in and changes the stuff completely. But you got to do it right. Like there's so many bad executions out there. It's so easy to get it wrong. So, but I think it could look very different, which is I think Datadog feels the pressure too.
Okay. Well, I think we have some time for maybe a couple questions from the audience. I think if we have the mics around so folks in the audience can Yeah, awesome. So maybe over there.
Hi. Especially for deterministic outcomes, how do you make sure that you can iterate on the prompts fast, like every other day, without regressing?
Deterministic outcomes as in like document extraction, for example? Or
It's like, let's say, checkout, checking out like a certain transaction.
I would say that one of the keys right now that I see is just you got to build some test set. Like you shouldn't be making prompt. Like if you really have a high quality thing in production or anything that's doing something somewhat complicated, and you'd make a change, you really can break like 10 other things pretty easily. So like I guess it's normal engineering in that sense, but it's engineering where those test cases typically use evals in some way. Like the output responses are rough, so evals are making sure it's kind of okay. Maybe you have different sets of evals, but it is like building a test set. And I even have some teams that are building automation where they build test sets from the traces. So like you can do stuff that's super interesting to help you with that set, but like, yeah, testing against changes would be my recommendation.
I mean, if you have deterministic expectations about what should be happening at runtime, you can also just at runtime throw actual exceptions, which is usually not possible because you don't know, because I don't know, the poem that you generated is maybe just like a bad poem, so you don't know. So you shouldn't, I don't know, get pagered, you shouldn't trigger like pager duty, but if you have like an expectation of this one thing should actually happen, then it would probably just hook it up to pager duty if you know that a checkout should be happening. But then, if you know, you don't need to use AI to trigger it.
Yeah. Let's thanks so much. Let's go to the next question. I think we have someone back there.
Hi, I'm just curious, what metrics are you using to determine what ratio of sampling you should do in production?
That's a good question. It seems to be somewhat ad hoc to me. Like people start as high as they can, realize maybe it's expensive and I should dial something back. A lot of times 100%, like if you're gated by generations in the first place, there's a natural gating and what's another call on top of it. But yeah, there's teams that are massive and they, 1% is actually still even a lot of money.
I think many of our customers use no sampling because they feel like they want to go for distillation at some point. They just attribute some kind of like value to capturing everything. Or, I don't know, you want to have explainability if like a customer complains, but you have no idea which customer will complain, so you can rather tweak retention instead of sampling.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of the cost comes from ingest, not from retention. So in the end, it will be expensive. But at least like larger companies usually like to retain a lot because they feel on the hook for if something doesn't work. They really want to be able with a security team to explain something if it doesn't work, but it's really costly. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, sorry, I was thinking evals, online eval sampling, but for traces, I'm with him. Like, I actually, very few people sample. They might shorten the time they save the data, so 15-day retention or 30-day retention or something, but yeah.
You need to be really big to sample.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like maybe we'll take one from this section and one over there. So hands up, can people raise their hands? I see a question right there.
Hi, so I'm surprised you didn't talk about optimization. Because for me, the future of all this is really to optimize.
Yeah.
Like for instance, one of your competitors, Comet, Topic, they just released an optimization framework, right? And so, part of it is to not only save on cost, but also improve the quality and just use agents to do that, right?
So we actually do have prompt optimization, online optimization in product. So we released something about 4 or 5 months ago called System Prompt Learning. Comet has DSPy, which is the gold standard for prompt optimization. Our take with DSPy is it's a great framework, but not great for production. It's really slow, really slow, 1,000 times slower than some of the stuff we run. And so I think the vision is there. I think the in our loops today, though, the reality is typically it's a human. Like we'll recommend instructions to add back to the prompt based upon evals and explanations generated from those. A human still is kind of in the loop saying, I'll take these instructions or not. Like we're just not in a spot where like you really want to take an automated feed of what comes back without thinking or looking at it. But absolutely. So what's that?
It costs less and it gets me the same result.
Yeah, there's a little. I still think that we're just not there. I mean, like the stuff I see, you don't want to just let the stuff free flow and go edit my system prompt. But you do really get good instructions back too. So you want to accept the ones that make sense. I think that's the vision. I still think the space is somewhat, I still think the space is early. So we're all, but that's the vision we're going towards is automation here to help you with those changes. So it's not just manual clicks either.
Yeah, I think for us, it's like we want to do what we do really well. And I feel like a lot of optimization, like the optimization works well for these kind of like deterministic workflows where you do like, I don't know, extraction from PDF files or something, where you have like a good data set that spans the full input distribution that you actually see in production. Otherwise, if you don't have good data sets and good evals, then basically you optimize against like a testing setup that is not good. And most teams are just not there that they have like an extremely good testing setup where they could onboard any employee to just experiment whatever they want. And where like the lead would be like, as long as evals pass, I'll just merge to production no matter what's in the prompt. Like you're not there usually. And then having like a domain expert reason about things is usually the more generalizable optimization than having something auto-optimized. But for some of these constrained use cases, auto-optimization works, but then also fine-tuning works, for example.
Yeah. Okay, and then one last question, I think maybe over there in the...
Hi. Thank you for answering all the questions. I guess my question is really, you build tools for developers to optimize agent systems, and I'm guessing that most of the time those are single agent systems. But I am wondering what you think about the concept of observability for developers in multi-agent systems, but in particular, inter-agent observability. So one agent observing another's behavior, and in particular, how this relates to, I guess, the topic everybody knows, which is context engineering. Mm-hmm. And do you plan on building tools in that with respect to that, basically?
Yeah.
For us, this I think comes back to like if you own all of these agents, I mean it's just like microservices. So then you get back to distributed tracing, where then if you instrument each one of them, then you have like a nice completed trace of all of these sub-agents. Where then usually the question is where are the organizational boundaries, whether it's all the same team, so they all end up in the same project RBAC system, or whether it's like different projects and they just basically interact with each other as like tools, but you don't see what's happening in the agent because you don't have access to the system. So if it's the same team, then usually it's just one big distributed trace, or if it's like different teams or different companies, then you just see them as tools. And I feel like for the kind of tracing and evals that we do, whether it's like an agent doing it or whether it's like it's very similar to like a tool call, the kind of like eval or what you want from tooling.
Yeah, I think it's, I would kind of second it in that, like we have multi-agent views. I think it's still early, like there's not as many teams with that view. And then I do think it is like services. I do think there's some unique, probably, just like there's unique challenges to debugging the AI systems, are going to be unique challenges to debugging inter-agent, like handoff in messaging and stuff like that. And there'll be specialized tools that we add on top of what we have. But you can visualize kind of the inter-agent connectivity today. We've got that, and you can dive into certain cohorts or groups of them. And then my view is like maybe it's tools, MCP, that's the interface eventually between these, or maybe it's a local tool call. But yeah, so we're early. We're building tools. It's in our it's in our purview, and I think we'll be adding more and more to help the stuff make it work better.
Okay. Well, gosh, this has been a super fun conversation. Yeah. Certainly for me, hopefully for everyone here as well. So thanks, guys, for coming up and having this chat together. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Last TypeScript.
Cool.